My wife is away for 10 days, and there are 10 Fast and Furious movies. I think you can see where this video is going. What's going on, party people? How are y'all doing? And yes, today, I'm living my dreams of being a hyper-masculine bachelor by watching every single Fast and Furious film and ranking them. But before we get into that, press subscribe, because for every subscriber we get, another film executive out there makes another Fast and Furious movie. And another one. And another one. And another one.
And another one.
What does Harry Potter, Shrek, and Fast and Furious all have in common? They all came out in 2001, and nothing else happened that year. I vividly remember when this movie came out because I wasn't allowed to watch it when it came out in cinema because I grew up in a conservative household, but I do remember when it came out in DVD, and I was able to watch it at my friend's house during a sleepover. Don't tell my parents. I was really excited to watch this movie again, but I was worried, am I chasing that feeling of nostalgia, or does this movie actually hold up 20-something years later? So I sat down to start what would be hopefully the most fun that I've had in 10 days while I've had the whole apartment to myself. That's if I don't go insane by Prime shoving ads down my throat so many times during this movie. Sorry, if I'm paying for a service, why am I watching ads all the time? Do Prime want me to live like it's the 2000s again with ad breaks in a movie? And you know what? I digress. Let's just watch the film. From the jump, this movie has everything that you could ever want from it. Fast cars, hot girls, a banger soundtrack, and most importantly, organized crime.
I keep forgetting that all of like the heists in this movie are all just about like VCRs. That's crazy to think how far it evolved.
And seeing as this is going to be by far the longest video I've ever made on my channel, I'm not going to explain the plot points of every film, but I will show the synopsis of every single movie, and you can pause to read it. But let's dive into this experience. And I'm not sure if it was like the wave of nostalgia hitting me, but I was having the time of my life watching this film. I forgot how fun movies were in the early 2000s. If you're not a millennial like myself, once the clock hit the year 2000, everyone was just having so much fun because we were living in the future, and it felt like creativity just had all these new doors open for them because everyone wanted to push the limits of what was possible. Everyone was just experimenting and having a fun time. One thing I couldn't wrap my mind around though were how blue Paul Walker's eyes were in this movie. It was actually more distracting than it was anything else. I feel like if this movie came out today, his eyes would be like the handsome Squidward meme. They would be everywhere. I cannot stress enough how much happens in this film. This movie only goes for like an hour and 45 minutes, but we have so many different plot points happening at once, and this was so engaging, and it made me realize how dumb movies are today. There's like a 3-hour Marvel film just following one storyline, and it's just like they just throw in all these other characters in the movie to make you feel engaged, because it's like, oh, remember this one comic book from like the 60s? Remember that one character? He's in the movie now. Wow. But I think overall, the main plot point of Paul Walker being an undercover cop and trying to bust who's doing all these heists on VHSs is a great plot point, because along the way, he finds out about family and he realizes, hey, these people stealing all these like VHSs and surround sound systems, they're not the bad guys. I feel like this is soft launching ACAB, you know? Because Paul Walker understands that these characters are just doing this just to get by and just to pay their bills. And there are much bigger threats out there than people just stealing DVD players. Mind you, do you remember the VHS and DVD player combo? Man, if you rolled into someone's house and they had that, you knew that they had money. But yeah, we have heists, we have Asian gangs, there is a race that happens in the desert called Race Wars, pause. There's this crazy torture scene, Jesse dies and Vince almost dies, and Brian falls in love with Mia, and most importantly, they have family. All in under 2 hours. Marvel, take note. My biggest love for this movie is just how they went over the top for everything. The music, the cars, the choreography, the cinematography. They just threw everything at the wall and it stuck. And that is why the Fast and Furious is getting A.
I had so much fun watching it. I don't care that it's almost midnight now. I had so much fun watching this movie. They were running off nothing but vibes in the 2000s, and that's what I love about this franchise.
I also wanted to determine where in this franchise do these movies suddenly become airplane movies. The airplane movie theory is quite simple. Could you put on a movie and then just zone out and go to sleep and wake up and still understand what is happening in the movie? That's what I wanted to determine. At what point in the franchise does it turn into this? Now it's time for day 2. Today, Too Furious. I woke up and it was a typical raining Vancouver day, and for some reason it was just hitting me in a wave of nostalgia I've never felt in a long time, because I grew up in a small beach town, and when it rained, when it's not summer, there's nothing else to do than to sit around and watch movies. And I feel like I was scratching that itch and healing my inner child by starting this ridiculous challenge. So I did the classic heat up the pizza from the night before and sat down to watch the next film, Too Fast, Too Furious. And it's called that because it's the second installment in the franchise. As mentioned before, here's a synopsis for Too Fast, Too Furious, pause to read. But I totally forgot that this movie doesn't include the entire main cast from the first film. They only keep Brian, aka Paul Walker, and they just have a new slate, fresh start of a whole new cast, including Ludacris, who replaced Ja Rule in the film, which I think is by far the funniest subplot of this entire franchise. But I keep thinking, like, maybe this was their intention from the start. In the whole franchise, they would include Paul Walker in each movie, but each movie would contain a new cast, a new threat, and would include the entire first cast of the movie. Maybe that was the biggest criticism of this film, and that's why they introduced them later in the franchise. Oh, how different this entire franchise could have been. From the jump, this movie is absolutely crazy. Literally, in the first 10 minutes, we have like this insane race through the streets that ends with a jump over the bridge, and they're just flying through the air for a while, and Stanley got in the way, so I guess I will never find out how this scene ends. I do love how this was obviously off the success from the first film, and they were like, yeah, we need to start going crazier. Let's just start having fun. And I honestly believe that was the beginning of the entire franchise, the point of the franchise, and how every movie just got more and more insane. But this movie introduces Tyrese Gibson, and he is by far the most charismatic person in this entire franchise, and I'm going to talk about it later in the other films, because this man is severely underrated and undershown in this entire franchise, in my opinion. Probably one of my favorite facts about Tyrese Gibson, it's not the crying meme, okay? That's actually kind of sad when you really think about it. Stop being so insensitive. But my favorite fact about him is he actually leaked to the world that Apple was going to buy Beats by Dre, which is in a very famous documentary, The Defiant Ones, which I highly recommend you watch. Him and Dre are just drinking one night, and he starts going on Facebook Live or something like that, and just blows like a multi-billion-dollar deal and starts crip walking and stuff. It's so funny how he did that. I don't know. That's just like a fun fact for you. I'm full of fun facts when it comes to the entertainment industry. It also introduces what I thought was Jennifer Lopez. Nope, turns out it's just someone that looks like her. You know Jenny from the block? Yeah, this is Jenny from Wish.com. Speaking of cast, we have this girl called Suki, and I need to shine a light on this character for a moment, because as a kid, I had the biggest crush on this girl, because I was like, oh man, a hot Asian girl that's into fast cars, I'm gonna marry this woman one day. I loved her so much that I put a photo of her, yes, this exact photo that you're looking at right now, as the screensaver on my family computer. And me, being a dumbass kid, I didn't know how to change it back, and I got grounded for a week. Man, this photo lives in my head rent-free. Culturally, I have to mention that these two movies of this franchise inspired some of the best games that I've ever played as a kid, Need for Speed Underground 1 and 2, and I could make a whole video about that. If you want to see that, comment down below, because I played endless hours on those games as a kid, and I can't talk about it now. But yes, these movies and the games are inspired all together, quite obviously. But I cannot stress enough how influential these games and movies were if you were a young dude in the 2000s like I was. And now I have to mention the most famous line in this entire movie.
Drop it, I don't want to talk about it.
Drop it, hell. I want to hear about this, homie.
I said forget about it, cuz.
He said the line!
This is so funny because in the first movie, Brian's a cop, and now he's throwing out black and Hispanic slang like it's his first language. This line has a chokehold on me because there is an Instagram page dedicated to posting this line every single day, and you can bet your ass that I send this meme to at least 3 of my friends at least once a week. If you've never seen this franchise, the only way I can describe it is
how Michael Bay was doing Transformers 1 and then he did Transformers 2, and each one he wanted to step up like the CGI like crazy. It's like the same theory when it comes to all the Fast and Furious movies. And now, after saying out loud, I understand those are two very niche references that a lot of people probably won't get, especially if you had a social life.
I feel like this movie had a large impact of culture in society, and I really can't explain the reasoning why. It's definitely like a you had to be there moment, but look at my Caucasian skin. I grew up in a cracker household, and movies like this gave me the insight of what other cultures around the world celebrate. I feel like movies like this are just so important when you're a kid and you're trying to learn more things about the world.
I'm gonna be honest, there's like 20 minutes left of this movie, and I have just totally forgotten what the whole point is of like the main villain and like why he's such a bad guy. I don't even care anymore. Just that much cool stuff has happened throughout this entire film. I could give less of a shit about the villain. And I think that's the precedent that sets the tone for the rest of the series. If that sentence makes sense.
But as the credits rolled, I saw that this film was directed by the one and only John Singleton, who I can make an entire video about it as well on its own. But this man is the GOAT when it comes to culture. RIP to him. And oh my god, this movie, absolutely incredible. It is getting the S tier, baby. It's a new day, it's a new movie. And today we are playing Tokyo Drift. I'll be honest, when this movie first came out, I wasn't too sure about it. It felt like a complete turn from the original cast and crew and just trying to go in a completely different direction that I wasn't too sure about when this film first came out. But talking about culture, this is what I mean when I'm talking about cultures around the world, because I feel like the first two movies were shining a light on American culture, Hispanic and Black culture when it comes around cars and all that kind of stuff. And they took that same formula and they went to Japan with it. And if there's one thing that we have to do for certain is we have to do things for the culture. And there is nothing more than a culture shock when you send a redneck kid to live in Japan. What, no 8-lane freeways with a McDonald's and a gas station combo? What in the communism is this? Here is a Tokyo Drift synopsis, pause to read. Straight away, this movie threw me for a culture shock because I grew up in Australia. I live in Canada now, but growing up in Australia and seeing kids going through metal detectors, I was like, damn, this must be like a really tough school and like really sketchy, until I started like traveling more and going to America more and realizing that this is most schools in America. Which is such a wild concept. Hey, if you're from America, blink twice if you're okay. It's alright, I know that you're not okay.
When I first saw this intro scene, me and my friends genuinely thought it was like a gimmick just for this school, until we found out that this is how most schools in America are ran, with metal detectors and security like this. Crazy stuff. But that's also a good setup for this movie. Maybe the directors were playing 4D chess when it came to this intro scene. They're like, oh man, the world is not going to be ready for the culture shocks. They're going to get thrown at them with this cinematic masterpiece. I do appreciate and respect the filmmakers' respect for our time, because we're 15 minutes in and we have this whole movie set up, essentially. And I really appreciate that. I feel like there's a lot of misleading things, or like those movies where it starts in the middle of all the action and then you kind of have to like just hope that you can understand what's happening with the storyline to unpack what's actually happening and what led to those events. Go put respect where respect is due.
My favorite subplot of this film is something that lasts for like 5 seconds, as we're introduced to the dad of this film in Japan, and we're introduced to him in the sleaziest way possible, because he's just had an interaction, you know what I mean, with a Japanese woman, and she's leaving the house. It's absolutely playing into the stereotype of a middle-aged divorced white dude living in an Asian country. I love the accuracy of culture in this film. Another funny point of the casting in this movie, we have Bow Wow, and I looked up his IMDb, and it looked like the only film that he did before Tokyo Drift was Like Mike, and I want to know the jump between doing Like Mike and doing Tokyo Drift. We have another like love interest in this movie, and yeah, I had a crush on this girl. What can I say? She was Australian and she was into cars. But there are so many cultural moments that we learn as the audience in this film that I think is so inherently funny. There's this one scene where the dad's like, hey, you have to find your own way to school, navigating the Japanese subway system. Sorry, did you forget that your son is from America and probably like Ohio or something where they don't have public transport whatsoever? And you want him to navigate the subway to school? Here is the map of the Japanese subway system. Obviously, this kid's gonna be late to school every single day.
I will say, I do love how much this movie is learning about cultures and being indulged in cultures, learning a lot about them. Especially from like Western dudes, like, you know, he's learning about drifting, but he's also learning about Japanese culture and like all the respect that comes with it, as well as, you know, Yakuza and everything. I don't know. I just think it's cool as like a premise. Now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm not a dumb, stupid teenager that just likes drifting.
I feel like this movie really bridges that gap between Eastern and Western cultures. And, you know, as a kid, I learned a lot about Japanese culture just by watching this movie, especially criminal culture.
I love how he went from like just street racing, like that's as far as he went in terms of like criminal activity, and that's why he had to move to Japan in the first place, because he was just doing like juvenile crime. But then he moved to Japan and started doing stuff with Yakuza. That pipeline's crazy. That is how that shit doesn't work, you know? It's kind of reminds me of like, you know, Scared Straight. And they thought, you know, showing kids the prison life would scare them into like, you know, living a straighter life. But then you'll read the stories afterwards and the kids just kept doing shit. It's basically that. It's basically that, but in cinema form.
I do like the risk that the filmmakers took when it came to Tokyo Drift, though. In the final scene where Dom is in the movie for like 30 seconds, because they're like, there is a slight chance that if this movie does well, we're gonna make more of them. And that was the biggest gamble that this film could have ever made, and goddamn did it pay off. But my favorite fact about Tokyo Drift is when they were filming the scenes in Shibuya Crossing and they couldn't really get like the proper permits for filming some of these scenes, they had this thing called a fallback director, and there's this wonderful article written about it. But essentially, this guy walked up to the director and said, hey, I'm your fallback director because we're doing this guerrilla style. And they shoot this scene and the police get involved and they arrest the guy that said he was the fallback director, and he spends a night in jail so the rest of the crew can continue shooting this movie. And this fact plays out like the whole meme of Martin Scorsese saying this is cinema. I love this movie for that fact and for so many other reasons, and that is why this is getting the goddamn S tier. Oh, also Han dies, but I'm sure that's not going to have any consequences of the timeline of these movies moving forward. Well, Han is alive in the next movie, Fast and Furious. Off the bat, I gotta say, if you want to do this 4D chess move and trying to jump between timelines on every single movie, the least you could do to respect our time is to add in dates or context so we can understand what the actual fuck is going on.
So what I'm gathering for the first 20 minutes of this movie is that this takes place after Too Fast, Too Furious. But it's confusing as to why Brian is now working for the FBI. Because last time we saw him, it was Too Fast, Too Furious. And when he finished up, he was with his buddy and he was like, yo, we're going to open up our own shop in LA. And I was like, okay, so they went back to LA, but they didn't open a shop. He went to work for the FBI. Now, 30 minutes in, we're finally figuring out the timeline of events. Still confusing, but we're figuring it out. I think I know what's happening now. So, because he helped the feds after Too Fast, Too Furious, then they were like, Brian, come work with us. And he was like, you know what? I take back ACAB. I take that back. I'm back on board with the blue because I know Dom won't accept me as family. And like that, this is his new arc, you know? He's like, now he has to leave the feds which is the highest level of ACAB, and rejoin the family. That's my prediction for this movie 30 minutes in.
But honestly, none of that matters because I have to say that this movie is an absolute stinker. This is an absolute snooze fest. I could not have cared less while watching the fourth movie of this franchise. I don't know where they dropped the ball when it came to the story of this movie. There are some elements that are integral to future films in the franchise, but it definitely does not warrant the 2-hour runtime that this movie actually has.
I feel like this has just taken a massive turn since the first movies. Like, because the first film was jam-packed with storylines and there was just so much going on. But honestly, I'm halfway through this movie and I honestly feel like I can already predict how this movie is going to turn out. And it just feels lackluster. It just feels like a filler episode. This movie, I feel like I could watch at 1.5 times speed.
It's just such a disappointment coming off like such a high from those first 3 movies. I feel like this is the come down of the films, the hangover of the movies, and not the actual film, the hangover, the one where you wake up at a house party and you don't know where everyone is and you feel like crap and your phone is dead type of hangover. You know what? Here is a synopsis of the film. You can pause to read it, but really the only thing that you need to understand from the fourth movie is that Letty dies. That's it. It's just disappointing because we are introduced to all of like the cast from the first film in this movie, and I feel like they could have done so much more for it, but they just didn't do anything with any of the tools that they had at their disposal. And that's why we have the first D of this entire list. I won't lie, I was really nervous going into Fast 5, only because of how disappointing the fourth movie was, but also this is part of the franchise that I don't really remember at all. So I'm kind of going into uncharted waters from here on out. But I can't sit around and be scared of a movie. What am I, a wuss? So I sat down and watched the fifth movie, Fast 5. I find it interesting that they called this movie Fast 5 because there are definitely more than 5 fast people in this entire movie. Try saying that 10 times. But right away, when this movie started, my fears were put to rest because this movie was so much fun to watch.
I'm hyped. I'm back on board, baby. I'm so happy. At this point, I'm starting to understand what the missing link was this entire time. It's not family. It's organized crime.
It made me think, did they make number 4 purposely bad so you can see and appreciate the fifth one so much more? You know, they made the fourth movie like a lobotomy film. Because it reset my monkey brain to appreciate how well made this film actually was. It introduces The Rock to the franchise, who plays a cop, and I feel like with the gang trying to go after this corrupt businessman that basically runs all of Rio, the threat of that, while also the threat of The Rock and his cop team chasing the gang, I feel like the stakes were right back to the original film, but they're just playing with a much larger budget now.
I think the reason why I'm enjoying this so much more is that there is so much more happening in terms of like danger, and you know, it's like, oh, they're running from the cartel, but they're also running from the cops. That is smart filmmaking, you know, just up in the ante, as we like to call it.
Also, at this point in the franchise, if you're a young man watching these movies, you don't need testosterone boosters. You just need to watch this franchise. Speaking of The Rock, he is unnecessarily sweaty in this movie compared to everybody else. I don't know if that was a contractual thing or not, but I actually have to admit, The Rock's acting in this movie is really good. And I'm wondering, at what point in this franchise does his acting get slowly and slowly worse? Because I'm honestly expecting when we hit like the final movies with The Rock in it, he's just non-verbal and just doing like the faces that he makes in all of his other films. But I have to admit, him acting in this movie, really good.
I love how they're basically assembling the Robin Hood of the Avengers. You know, they're not great people, but hey, they're trying to steal from even worse people than them. Pretty commendable if you ask me.
I feel like at this point in the movie, they're really highlighting the heists that they're going on, and they're starting to understand that audiences want to see more heists and less racing. Because this entire film is working towards the big heist at the end of this movie. When people talk about iconic scenes in movies, you might think of like the Joker blowing up the hospital and how that was completely improv because like the explosives didn't work well with the timing of the button, but Heath Ledger, to his respect, was just improving to make everything work for that film because a lot of money on the line. And I respect that scene. But the heist at the end of Fast 5 absolutely tops that. There's this incredible video online of the stunt coordinator of Fast 5 walking us through this heist, and the lengths that they went to pull this off is absolutely incredible. And that is why we are so back, because Fast 5 is getting put on the A-list. Alright, Fast 6. I was so excited going into Fast 6 because I was still living off the high from Fast 5. Hell, even my dog was excited. Here's a synopsis for Fast 6. And I have to say, right away, I love that the filmmakers now respect our time, because there's this whole intro sequence with a really dope soundtrack that I was absolutely vibing out to, and through images, they kind of like catch you up to speed as to what's happening in the timeline. They understand. It's like, hey man, 5 movies into this franchise, here's a quick little recap for you before we dive into the absolute insanity that this movie actually is. This is the part of the franchise where they have completely abandoned racing and they are now absolutely furious. There are so many nuanced things that I want to touch on in this movie, but I just don't have enough time because so much stuff happens. But what I will say is I feel like they're finally in their groove when it comes to this movie. People don't care about fast cars and hot girls. They want to see dudes doing dude shit, which is pulling off heists. We are not even 10 minutes into this and I am so hooked. I'm so hooked. Okay, I'm starting to think that this could be a contender to beat number 5. I'm 30 minutes into this movie and I feel like due to the success of Fast 5, all thanks to that final scene, of course, I feel like they just went, fuck it, we ain't doing racing anymore. We kind of are, but actually we're just doing heists now. We're going full GTA. Think of every fun GTA or action game that you played involving cops and international spies and all that shit. That's what we're doing now. That's our model. And honestly, if they keep doing this for the rest of the series, I'm here for it. I'm locked in. And I feel like they're now taking a leaf out of the book of all of like the really successful spy movies of the 2000s, if you could remember those. The feeling I'm getting from Fast and Furious 6 reminds me a lot of the era of like Bourne Identity and Mission Impossible, like the 007 films with Daniel Craig. I think that's when that era started. I'm in full film nerd mode here, but I'm also in like a nostalgia feeling. I don't know if you're also in your 30s and you remember that era of film in like the mid to late 2000s. Let me know in the comments below, because I'm getting the exact same feeling watching Fast and Furious 6. You know, they're trying to keep that vibe alive, and I really appreciate that. Because Letty being reintroduced into this movie and it's revealed that she has no memory is very Bourne Identity coded. But what really pisses me off about this subplot is she has no interest into finding out who she was before she lost all of her memory. There's a scene where she meets Dom and they have this face-off moment and he's just trying to be like, hey, I know who you are. And she's like, okay, bye. I understand this is a movie, but if you lost your memory, wouldn't you just be trying to figure out exactly what's happened and who you were before? I feel like she's completely dismissed her old life here. She's like, yep, well, this is me now. I'm a criminal in London. Like, wouldn't you want to be remotely interested, but hey, maybe I need to switch that part of my brain off and turn on the monkey brain. Also, The Rock has a sidekick in this film that I absolutely hate, because she's like the really cringy, silent girl in Deadpool. Sorry, I don't make the rules, I just make the video, but I really did not like her character at all. I think what I'm really respecting about these insane action scenes is how well they're shot. They actually really care about the action scenes. I mean, they're probably spending millions of dollars on these scenes, so you would kind of have to care, but the camera placements, the editing, everything for it,
I would say it's pretty spot on.
And there is like a twist at the end of Fast 6 that I could not have seen coming. And it actually got me really excited because then what followed was by far the most absurd, insane, non-stop action scene that I've probably ever experienced when it comes to film.
Holy shit.
Oh, and we finally have closure as to what happens to Han in Japan. It only took 3 movies for them to figure out this timeline. But do you remember how I said earlier that they put Dom into Tokyo Drift for a short time and it was like the biggest gamble that the filmmakers took? I feel like at the end of this movie where they're introducing Shaw and what happens with Han in Japan, I feel like this is a much more confident gamble that they did, because they would have done this scene and they would have looked at the camera and saying, look, film executives, this franchise is going to continue with or without you. So we're going to do another one, okay? And this is how it's going to go. Mwah, chef's kiss.
I do enjoy how Jason Statham came out of a car like it was like one of those Bachelor reality shows, and it's just like, a new bombshell has entered the villa. I hope that's how they're going to introduce every villain going forward.
Honestly, all in all, fantastic movie. I had a great time, and that's why it is getting up there on the A tier. I was kind of getting bored watching all of these movies by myself, so I blew up my friend's phone telling him how excited I was from the previous 2 movies and invited him over to watch number 7 with me.
All right, what are your expectations for this movie?
There's gonna be cars. I actually don't know if I saw number 6 or not, so I hope it doesn't matter. I think at this point in the series, things still make sense, right? As far as I know, and it's still good movies. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Also, I hate to mention it, but this is the last movie of Paul Walker.
This one?
Yeah.
That's this one?
Yeah.
I'm about to cry
Yeah.
on video.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
so this is the one with Sam Smith? See You Again song?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Here is a synopsis for number 7. Pause to read. This is where I feel like the franchise just goes completely mask off and they go down the route of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's a throwback to Race Wars from the first movie, and there's a random cameo from Iggy Azalea. As always, The Rock is sweaty as hell in this movie as well.
Why is he so sweaty? He's in an air-conditioned office all day. This is so annoying.
And like an extended moment from Tokyo Drift that we haven't seen yet, but it was very obvious that they shot that many years later because the characters look insanely different. Well, except for Vin Diesel. I honestly don't think that man has aged in the past 20 years.
Adam just made a really good point off camera that these action scenes just go on for way too long and I'm fatigued from it. You know, it's like I'm done with the dopamine, but they keep trying to milk it for everything that it's got, like an iPad kid.
Maybe it's that, like, we've just been dopamine maxing outside of the movie.
Yeah.
And because when you watched this years ago when it first came out, I bet in theaters especially, you would be like, this is crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But now that we've seen this around a lot,
Yeah.
the action's just too much. As a car guy, I actually want to see a bit more cars.
Yeah.
It needs to have more flow.
Yeah.
This is like a 15-minute straight
Just
action.
action. Yeah.
15 minutes is a long time.
Yeah.
Hello, Stanley.
It's still going. It's still going. Like, what? Yeah, we've been talking for the last 5 minutes and the scene is still going.
I have to admit, I feel like there was too much action in this movie. I think that they saw how insane and successful the big action sequence was at the end of 6, and they thought that they could just like replicate that and continue that and push it further, but I just think they kind of missed the mark on that one. My friend Adam also makes YouTube videos, and he made the great analogy of he felt like he was watching like a YouTube channel trying to pivot and grow and broaden their audience, so they completely make a turn from the original content that they were doing and now are kind of like sensationalizing what they're doing to broaden their audience. It's like the Mr. Beastification of the Fast and Furious franchise. That is what I'm trying to say. Not only does his action sequence go for 20 minutes, there is like a 5-minute break between this action sequence to the next one. And this scene involves more cameos from Ronda Rousey and T-Pain as a DJ at the party. But I can understand that they're trying to push the limits of like what's possible in cinema because they drive this really expensive car from one building to the next. Man, could you imagine if you were sitting there watching that car go through the building and thinking there was a plane in 2001?
We are over halfway in this movie. What are your thoughts?
Honestly, the action parts, like, they are sick. Like, watching them jump from the buildings to building in Abu Dhabi is crazy. But also, it was like 10 minutes after they just drove off the side of the mountain and stuff. Like, I feel like I need a little bit of time to chill in between. Yeah. And I am a car guy. I'm a big car guy, so I wish I was seeing some more cars. And I also said by the end, I was like, I might cry. But to be honest, like, there's like no like emotion in this movie. Like, what's her name? Letty doesn't even remember what's going on. Yeah. The plot, they're stealing some computer chip and a hacker that we'd never seen before. Like, I don't know about...
And like, why do I care? Like, why should I care about that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I don't know if you're ranking the videos or not later, or rating. Yeah. And I wonder what the popularity of this one is. It's sad because, you know, it's Paul Walker's last movie, but at the same time, I don't see how this one could be a banger.
Yeah, it's his last, but it's not his strongest, that's for sure.
I'll be honest, I didn't really care for the storyline of the 7th movie in this installment because just so much action happens, it overshadows any kind of plot points and story that they're trying to convey in this film.
The street always wins.
No way! What the fuck?
And I have to admit, for Paul Walker's final film, this was a big disappointment. I wish that they had like one more movie with him and revived the lackluster storyline that they had for number 7. I feel like if they had one more movie with him, they could fine-tune it, much like the GTR that he drives. But as the credits rolled, Adam and I saluted for the one and only Paul Walker. R.I.P. King. I hope you're racing well in heaven.
I was looking for more cars, and it's kind of a meme, but honestly, a little more family. Like, there was just, honestly, just too many explosions. If it didn't happen in 6, because I haven't watched that one recently, this is the movie where it's gone crazy. Last thing I'd say is, like, the Paul Walker scene. Like, that is the first time I've finished this movie. This is one of the only Fast and Furious movies I haven't seen yet, and it's because I didn't want to watch that. I'm serious. That's the reason. And to have it be that kind of a movie, and then it still almost made me sad at the end, but while I was watching it, I was like, how are they going to turn this into like a tribute and emotional at the end? It was just such a contrast, but man, R.I.P. Paul Walker. I had goosebumps, man. Yeah. Like the amount of straight males that cried during that scene because they grew up with Paul Walker, and he's one of the reasons that we became car guys, is just crazy. And like that alone makes this movie carry a lot of weight. Yeah. But the rest of it, not so much. Yeah. But the ending, so deep.
And it sucks to say, but I'm going to put Fast 7 as C tier.
Chat, I'm going to keep it real with you. I'm exhausted. It's like, what's the time? It's 2:30 p.m. and Fast 8 is what I'm up to for tonight. But I am exhausted from the movie last night. And no, it's not because I stayed up until 1 a.m. scrolling Instagram Reels. No, it's not because of that. I've been thinking about Fast 7 and how much of like a non-movie it is. I think we are deeper into the airplane theory than we originally thought.
But there's no time for yapping. I've got more movies to watch. So I heated up another ready-made meal to really get me in the feeling that I was alone for the next 10 days while my wife was out of town, and I put on the 8th installment of this franchise, The Fate of the Furious.
I find it interesting that they called it The Fate of the Furious because, spoiler alert, I guess The Fate's pretty okay if they made more movies after this.
As always, pause to read the synopsis. To be honest, I feel like number 8 was an absolute snooze fest. I honestly just feel like at this point, they're just copy and pasting every formula that they have from the previous movies because they know that it works, and the storylines are they're just not as compelling as they once were. I understand it's all about family. I'm on board for that. But I'm sorry, the main plot point of this entire film is that Dom is harboring a child from a previous relationship, and that's the whole reason why he went rogue. So, Elon Musk does that like every 6 months.
My biggest disappointment with all of these later movies in the series is all these films take place in different parts of the world, and I feel like it's such a missed opportunity to talk about the car culture in each of these countries, much like they did in Tokyo Drift. I feel like they should have kept that going and kind of explained more about the lore behind different car cultures around the world. I think that would have been a much more interesting angle, but it might not have made as much money.
The stakes of this film just feel really lackluster because I feel like everything could have been solved if Dom just communicated to his team like, hey, there's this crazy bitch that she has my kid. No time to explain my kid though. Can we just find out a way to kill her and go back to living our lives in Cuba?
Man, I just finished watching like the first action scene that they had in this film together as like a team, and I gotta say, Tyrese Gibson, I feel like he was robbed a little bit in this whole franchise because he is by far the most charismatic actor. I would watch all these movies and be really engaged if he was the lead role over Vin Diesel. Because like The Rock's acting is getting worse, and I feel like he's the only one that's still maintaining any charisma throughout this entire franchise. That's my main point of contention when it comes to the casting of these movies.
I have to shine a light on Tyrese Gibson. Tyrese, if you ever watch this video, man, you were robbed when it came to this series. I'm sure you're having a lot of fun and, you know, you're getting paid millions of dollars, okay? You probably have no complaints. But I have to admit, dude, you are so funny. You have so much energy and personality when it comes to this movie series, and I wish that you were highlighted more than some of the other bigger characters that they shine light on in every other movie that they have. There's this weird, like, sexual tension between Hobbs and Shaw throughout this entire movie, and I feel like a lot of the dialogue was just written by ChatGPT. I feel like the filmmakers of this franchise just got early access to ChatGPT, and that's what they're using to pump out a script.
It's just such a weird thing having like Dom's kid in this film as like a whole thing as of why he went rogue in the first place, because they never built a connection in the first place. I don't know, I guess you could make the argument that the whole point of this series is family, but we didn't know anything about this kid. Why should we care? Why should he care? You know? I don't know. Maybe I'm just hating at this point.
And I feel like at this point in the franchise, the approach that the filmmakers have is let's build out the craziest, wildest action scenes that no one has ever seen before, and then we'll create a story around it.
There's this scene where all these like cars get hacked and they just start driving remotely. It's crazy that the Fast and Furious predicted the future with the Tesla cars.
Feel like the action scenes absolutely overshadow everything else in the film. Like the movie starts off with this wrecking ball that goes through and destroys like all of these cars, and by the end they're being hunted by this Russian government agency and like a nuclear submarine as well that blows up, yet somehow they all miraculously survive.
No way, dude. There's no way.
Overall, I feel like this movie is just brain rot for adults, and there's this like great video that I watched talking about how like Marvel movies have kind of ruined cinema forever, and there's these weird parts of the film where they add in like pauses so the audience can laugh, but it's just unnecessary. I feel like Marvel is for the nerds, and Fast and Furious follows the same plot points of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's for dudes with high testosterone. And that's why I'm giving this movie the D tier. Now we're entering the final movies of this franchise, Fast 9. Pause to read the synopsis as always, and I want to say, I love the ridiculousness that this movie brings. Because there's this whole like intro scene that feels like the Uncharted video games on steroids, and my monkey brain was turned on to the max.
I know we're still just in this first action scene that goes for 20 minutes, but I will admit, this is definitely video game coded because I feel like this would be part of a level where you're like, okay, I need to jump over this cliff, but how do I do it? And then you just drive the car off the cliff time and time again until you realize that you got to hit the pole at a certain point, and that activates the rope that attaches to the car and swings you to safety. I love this, actually.
So in this movie, Dom has to face off with his brother that he, again, just never mentions in previous movies. I'm sorry. For a dude that's all about family, he never mentions his child that he has with another woman, and he also never mentions his brother that he's had this entire time. But I digress, because there are these funny flashback moments of like bonding and showing the conflict between Dom and his brother, but that the way that they showed you, the audience, figure out which one was Dom and which one wasn't, was that they gave Dom a buzz cut. I don't know why, I just found that really funny.
I love how they connected everything back to Han's death. And I would agree. I feel like that's the canon event, the Harambe death of everything. And if, he didn't die, there wouldn't be no more. So it's all connected. You know what I'm saying? I swear to God, if Han is like somehow alive after all this, I'm going to crash out.
Bro, you gotta be kidding me.
I really got to stop caring about the storyline because nothing makes sense anymore, I'm just here for the vibes. That's it. I'm just here for the vibes.
There are parts of this movie where they are really self-aware on how ridiculous this franchise actually has gotten, and I do appreciate that a lot. As well as giving us like random bits of dialogue to fill in gaps of like previous movies that we might have forgotten about, which I do appreciate that compared to all the Marvel movies, because I feel like the Marvel movies will just show you like a random character from a previous film, and it's like, hey, you know this guy? He made the cameo in that movie from like 6 years ago. At this point in the franchise, it is quite clear that these movies are just background noise. So I did a bunch of stuff while this movie was on. I did the laundry, I lined up my beard, I played with my dog, and I even took the trash out. I finally sat down to watch the scene where they go to space.
I feel like the idea for this whole entire scene of them going to space was stemmed off a tweet. And because that tweet got so much love, they're like, yep, no, we're making that as part of this franchise. And I respect the filmmakers because of that. They're listening to the people and listening to what they want.
And the rest of the movie, as always, follows the rest. High action scenes with new weapons being unlocked, just like we're in a video game. I am going to give Fast 9 this C tier, but I have to admit, at the end of this film, there is this beautiful moment where all the characters come together for a good old-fashioned barbecue at the OG house, and there's this beautiful touch of Paul Walker pulling into the driveway, and for someone who has built their life in a new country with my wife and my dog, it made me understand the importance of family. And it was such a beautiful moment because I'm starting to understand how important family is and how family is not always the blood that you have with your relatives. So while I wait for my wife to come home, it's time to watch the final movie of this franchise, Fast 10. Or Fast X. Do you feel like this is the prequel to XXX with Vin Diesel? Remember that movie from the 2000s? That could have been a fun tie if they did that together. But they didn't. Here's the synopsis for Fast X. Pause to read. And I have to admit, I was kind of back on board when it came to the 10th movie of this franchise because they are showing us the really cool heist from the end of the 5th movie. And I feel like it's the extended cut, the director's cut of that scene because it's showing us things that we never saw before. And I was actually super hyped that the movie started this way. And it just made me appreciate filmmaking so much as an art form.
I have an idea. I want the next villains of this franchise to just be TikTokers. That's what I want. I want like the Paul brothers to be the next villains in the Fast and Furious franchise.
But other than that, it's the same formula with all the other movies that we've seen previously. But they do introduce Jason Momoa in this film, and oh my god, I wish they introduced him earlier into this franchise because he is so charismatic. I cannot stress enough how funny this dude is. I wish he was the villain in all of the movies and they were just trying to defeat him, because I don't know, maybe at this point I have missed that charismatic side of dialogue and characters in the movies, but I was having so much fun with him. There's this whole scene where he does like a Weekend at Bernie's thing with two people he just killed, and I have not laughed that hard at a movie in such a long time. They also have like other celebrity cameos. You know, they have the drummer from 21 Pilots in the movie for like 3 seconds, but then there's this other scene with Pete Davidson in it, and I have to admit, my monkey brain was turned on. I was having so much fun when it came to this movie. That was until this moment.
Are you kidding me?
That's right. This movie doesn't end. They to be continued, my ass.
I'm crashing out so hard. The credits are rolling. Are you kidding me? What was the purpose of doing this entire video? I thought there would be a conclusion, but no, I have to wait for another one?
I'm sorry. When my wife left town, I was on a mission to make this really fun video. I've had this video idea for like a year, and I was so excited to do this video. And this is the payoff that I have. I need an apology letter written to me by every film executive and from Vin Diesel personally himself. I have to admit, I've gotten got a bunch of times in my life. I don't think I've ever gotten got from a movie before, but I did this time. What was the point of this entire video? I'm putting Fast 10 on the D tier because I am so offended. I'm not waiting a whole year or two to complete this video. I thought this would have been it. Every other movie, there was a start and an end, but this is the first time they're like, no, not this time. Which I guess they're trying to keep us on our toes. But I need to stop rambling because this is by far the longest video I've ever made. Here is the final tier list. I'm severely offended. I'm going to go and watch rom-coms for a month straight. Maybe that'll be my next video. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. I never want to watch one of these movies ever again.